Hello, it is arplenoon, also known as Phoenix. I have another casual reading for you here today. This is the start of the fanfiction series I wrote called The Bridge Dumpers. There is 18 parts to it, and today we are starting with the prologue. Again, if you want to find any of my Undertale AU writings, you can find it on archiveofourown.com, AO3. Simply search for arplenoon. Alright, let's get started. The Bridge Jumpers. Summary. This story covers a much closer look at the Shattering Event from JumpVerse, specifically following the POVs of Disbelief Papyrus, Paper Jam, Error, and several OCs that were mentioned in that story. I recommend reading the Dreamfalls, Little Talks, 13 Nights, UnderCrete, FlowerGlitch, and Fellswap Prodigal prior to this, as they provide backstories to said OCs. This is an older story I wrote prior to writing JumpVerse, so as a result there will be many inconsistencies from that story. As far as canon, always take JumpVerse first before this story. The Bridge Jumper simply provides more details on how those events went down. Malady Sans' world ended in tragedy, but now he lives in the Omega timeline as a toy maker. Infected with the deadly virus, Mal is reserved to live his life alone in the woods to prevent others from being infected. His close friend, Disbelief Papyrus, a.k.a. Skep, has come to visit him, but Mal has something to tell Skep about the strange dreams he's been having. Prologue. And this is just what I already read off for the summary. Staring at the porch of his house, there Sans' daughter stood, his brother's clothes scattered upon the icy woods, covered in dust. The blood on her knife and clothes slowly flaked into white ash, Papyrus's scarf in her grip. Holding up his hands, Sans' bones rattled. Eliza turned to see him. There had to be a good explanation. Maybe something had happened while he was gone. Maybe Papyrus had finally lost it and attacked her. But in a moment there was no blood left, which meant none of it could have been hers. That look in her eyes, he'd seen it in his nightmares. Eliza? What happened? Was all he managed to say. She didn't answer right away, only giving a twisted grin. She attempted sympathy, but her voice only hummed with catharsis. Welcome home, Daddy. I've been very busy. I'm sorry you had to see that, but this is the best for all of us. I'll be able to leave the underground and Pappy won't suffer anymore. She began to step down the steps, which had been heavily compacted by unswept snow. That glare in her eyes showed their murderous intent. I'll make sure you don't have to suffer anymore either. Sans stumbled back before turning to run. Normally he would have teleported away, gone somewhere she couldn't have seen, and attempted to stop, or at least reason with her. However, he had expended too much energy that night patrolling Snowden and fighting off other monsters. There was no time to process, having seen his brother dusted. Eliza had grown tall over the past 10 years, and fast. She'd outrun him, and even Papyrus on many occasions. He'd even have the confidence to teach her to fight on her own. Then this shouldn't be happening. He knew that since she was human, she could easily overtake them, both of them, and leave the underground. But he loved her. He trusted her. What was happening was purely unimaginable. His breath wheezed as his soul burned. Sans dared not look over his shoulder. He didn't need to. He could hear Eliza's viciously fast footsteps encroaching upon him. Nearly able to hear the knife slash the air, Sans mustered what energy he could to teleport, but he didn't get far, nor discreetly. Off the road and into the woods, his ankle gave way. The weight of his bones tumbled and cracked through the frozen branches as he slid into the valley. He lost sense of where he was. Pain and bruises formed all over his body. The crunch of ice and twigs drew closer. Breath held, he didn't move, playing unconscious. His soul thumped wildly in his ribcage, thoughts racing. Please, Eliza, no, not you. Please tell me it wasn't you. Tell me it's just a joke. But there was no rush of concern, no apologies, no call of his name. He felt the snow shift next to him. She heaved before drawing a deep breath. Now! His instinct took over. Eyes flashed a light. Sans summoned a bone club he had fashioned with embedded nails. Rolling over, he swung his weapon up, striking Eliza across the head. The cracking of bone and her sharp yelp pierced his entire being. The teenage girl fell like a lump in the snow next to him, crimson sprinkling white like the start of rain. Unable to move, his bones rattled violently. Eventually, he took several sharp breaths before looking towards her. Eliza? Her motionless eyes stared back at him, held him in judgment of his sins. It was his daughter, laying there still. Sans had nearly forgotten that humans don't turn to dust. As he touched her shoulder, shaking her gently, he knew she wouldn't wake. Still, sweetheart? Please, this isn't funny. But he could sense no soul. It must have shattered quickly upon his strike. And yet, the fact that there was still a body gave him false hope. Weeping her name, he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. She still clutched Papyrus's scarf, now spotted deeper with her own blood. Sans lost track of time. How long had he sat there holding her? How long after the warmth had escaped? She felt as cold as the snow around them. He couldn't think, couldn't want for anything or grieve any more. He was ready to freeze and starve to death along with her. Only when the earth shook, snow fell from the trees, dust filled the overcast sky did he raise his head. Stone grinding moans grew steadily louder. Blue lines pierced the sky, pulling and tearing like it was nothing but fabric. Someone called his name. He turned to see a chromatic ghost. A child of no more than 8 wearing a striped shirt. With a sorrowful smile, they held out their hand, telling him it was time to go. Frisk? His voice, a whisper. Mal woke in a sweat. He'd overslept. Pushing himself up from his cot, he rubbed his aching skull, careful not to scratch at this cracked side as much as he wanted to. The morning light pierced through the blinds of his tiny RV. Bird songs echoed through the aluminum walls. The tiny living space a mess of the essentials and mementos found alongside any bachelor his age. The walls and ceiling around his cot were covered with Polaroids, pictures of him and his friends, his new life here in the Omega timeline, a waking reminder that his nightmares were only memories of the past. His eyes danced over them. In every one he wore his gas mask. He had to wear it when around other monsters. He'd been infected with that terrible disease from his world, which still ate away at his essence. Mal had been insanely careful to make sure no one else would get sick from him. The Omega timeline seemed like heaven, or at least the best heaven that someone like him deserved. He wouldn't forgive himself if this world ever became subjected to the horrors of his own. In many of the photos, he saw the faces of other Sanses. He couldn't be called Sans anymore, given they were all, well, Sans. Both a relief and a punishment. Everyone knew his story, what he'd been through, where he'd come from, so there wasn't much use talking about it. Yet he couldn't help but feel robbed. His former name, former life, reduced to his statistic. There were others, Undines, Alphys, Toriels, etc. But aside from his own name, what ate at him most was seeing his brother's or his daughter's faces. In the past few years since his arrival, he'd seen a few versions of Eliza living in the Omega timeline. His soul raced and he avoided them whenever he could. What were unavoidable were the faces of Papyrus. Sans's were the most common, but Papyrus's were the runners-up. He'd made friends with one in particular called Skep. In Skep's timeline, Frisk had murdered all the monsters in the underground. Sans died to save him, but in turn, Skep had to kill Frisk to stop the rampage. Before the virus, Mal's brother couldn't kill a fly. In fact, Mal saw Skep as the purest version of the brother he once knew, but someone who could conceive of the horrors he'd been through. The act of taking even one life, the guilt had been too much. Skep had devoted his life to the mysterious entity known as Corfris to rescue other refugees into the OT. Getting up, Mal started the coffee maker and took a seat on a stool. As the black liquid brewed, he focused on remembering what he planned today. A small corner of the RV had been devoted to scientific endeavors. Even after all these years, Mal couldn't kick the habit of wanting to understand everything. Though it was unsafe for him to travel the multiverse, given his illness, he'd recorded as much as he could learn about it. Leaning over, he grabbed up a black journal, retracing his notes within. His knowledge of how everything worked had become comprehensive, which meant there was now room for experimentation. The coffee maker beeped. Mal poured himself a mug, black, and headed outside with the journal tucked under his arm. A fog moved through the evergreens. When the light hit it, small rainbows made a light within the breeze, until the breeze snuffed them out. Mal had carved out a little place for himself in the woods. A perimeter of string and red flags cautioned folks from wandering too close. To the side stood an old sentry station repurposed into a storage shed. To the other, a table covered in a blue tarp. Mal pulled the tarp to look at his array of carving tools and several wooden toys he'd finished the night before. Finished, right. He'd been planning this day for a month. Uncertain how his experiment might go, he stopped taking custom orders a week prior. He'd take a moment to finish packing the items for delivery, after covering his nose and mouth with a fabric mask and sanitizing everything he touched. After which he gathered up his coffee again and proceeded with a short walk out of the woods to the tree line. Seagulls cried and flew overhead. Mal sipped his coffee as he looked over the massive city nestled by the sea. Fields of long grass moved like waves that separated him from the metropolis of his fellow monsters and humans. This place allowed him to breathe. Gone were the days he had to fight for survival or protect anyone under his charge. He'd almost resigned to this fate, spending the rest of his days as the mysterious toy maker in the woods, a simple life but pleasant. But his hubris pushed him to strive for more. His eyes caught sight of the taxi driving up the road. It came to a stop between where he stood and the city beyond. A tall, familiar skeleton came out, spotted him, and waved. Mal's smile grew and he waved back, watching his friend head through the grass and up the hill to meet him. Returning to the RV site, Mal set out 2 small tables and chairs about 6 feet apart, silverware, dishes, and chilled sodas from the fridge where he placed as well. He grabbed his gas mask, putting it on by the time Skep arrived. "Good afternoon, Mal. I brought the spaghetti casserole you requested. Yeah!" Skep mustered with a smile. Skep had a tough job, one that wore at him over the years and mellowed his temperament. Still, Mal appreciated the taller skeleton's efforts to retain his cheerfulness. He also appreciated Skep slowing down long enough to cook anything at all. "Thanks, Skep. This means a lot to me," said Mal, before they divided up the casserole to have lunch together. "So, how's that research you were telling me about coming along?" said Skep, barely eating and mostly drinking the soda. It didn't escape Mal's notice. "Right, the research." He got up to grab the journal from the workstation and sit back down. "Let's see. So, cross-checking reports for refugees and the AU jumpers across various worlds, everything can be mapped out like an ever-spreading web. Because of the highest number of survivors or different Sanses, this leads me to believe that there's one original Sans who's responsible for a predicament. Error, I believe, is the origin point or the atom of our multiverse." "I could have guessed as much. What do you think happened?" Mal flipped through the pages of his journal. "Back in my days at the laboratory, before the first human fell, we were trying to subvert the barrier, find a workaround the humans hadn't thought of. Even though monsters were made of the same magic humans used to create the barrier, not all of us together could compete with the will of humanity. So we had to get creative. Instead of magic, we tried physics, experimenting with time dilation and teleportation. My memory is hazy about those days, but I think we found something we shouldn't have." He raised his head to look at Skep. I think we found the anti-void. Unable to stop the flashes, Mal had only seen the anti-void twice in his life. Once when he had been rescued from his crumbling world, and before, that day in the lab when they opened the first portal. Oh, well, that doesn't seem so bad. We jumpers use the anti-void all the time to get around, said Skep. But as Skep spoke, Mal had begun to dissociate, his eyes going dark. Skep tilted his head and waved a hand. Mal, you all right? Mal's eye glow returned. Oh, yeah. What was I talking about? Right. Back then, we weren't AU jumpers. None of us had the portal code that's used today. We got into the anti-void, but we shouldn't have been able to get out. Somehow, I did when the others didn't. I can barely remember their faces. Taking a breath, Mal looked at the page in the journal that he'd penned while half asleep. The scribblings of a madman. I keep having a reoccurring dream. Black boxes appearing in the anti-void, eyes looking down at me. I feel overwhelmingly vulnerable. Those eyes, ancient and eldritch, capable of power far beyond us. I feel them constantly watching. If my theory is correct about Error being the original Sans, and if what happened to him is anything like what happened to me, I think we made contact with something we could never truly understand. I've come to call them the witnesses, gods, outer dimensional aliens, whatever they are. They've been toying with us. Skep shifted in his seat. The witnesses? I've never heard of anything like that before. Are you sure? You've had some wild visions from your illness. Mal sighed. I have to be sure. We've achieved multiverse travel, and yet none of us can break a single barrier in any of the undergrounds without 7 human souls. If our worlds were horizontal lines, and the barrier were 2 dots on those lines, instead of crossing those points, we've moved off the line entirely. Mal made the motion with his hand. Haven't you found it strange how every single world we come in contact with is at least familiar? We're always meeting different versions of ourselves, rarely anyone truly new. Even in our vast multiverse, we're all still trapped inside the barrier. Skep tilted his head and thought, I suppose that makes sense, but that's really not such a bad thing, is it? Maybe we didn't get back to the surface, but we discovered something so much more grand, don't you think? Maybe, but doesn't it bother you, Skep, seeing our faces on other people? Mal set down the book and rubbed his arms. Doesn't it bother you seeing the faces of the people you knew, but it isn't them? Refugees sacrificing their names, their identities to get along? What we used to be changed into a catalog? Well, maybe a little, but don't we all have so much to be grateful for, still being alive? Still, Mal couldn't help but recall all those faces. When he looked in a mirror anymore, he only saw a blur. It's not right to me. My world might have been terrible, but I still felt like I belonged to myself. That mattered. Suddenly, Skip stood, arms outstretched. But Mal, you do matter. Sure, you're a Sans, but you're not like any other. You're insightful, creative. You provide something unique to this community. You're a toy maker, besides. Skip sighed. Yes, it does bother me, but this is just how things are. There's no reason to let it get to... What if there was a way out? Mal interrupted. What? A way out of the multiverse. A way to get to a world untouched from anything we know. I think I found a way to communicate with a witness. They'd be the only one capable of doing it. The taller skeleton held his hands and seemed to sweat. Away from here? You want to leave? But this is your home, isn't it? Isn't it good enough? We care about you. I care about you. I don't want you to... I'm dying, said Mal, unsure how better to put it. Dread filled Skep's face. You're... what? Mal took a breath, sinking back into his plastic chair. I don't have much time left. The virus is killing me. The more I suppress my aggression, the more it eats at my soul. Even if there isn't a way out, at least, the very least, I want to see if it works. Maybe I can't save myself, but maybe I can save others who feel like me. Others who want a way back to a home and an identity that's their own. Skep fell back into his chair. You're going to die? Now you know why this means so much to me. Mal held his hand towards the taller skeleton. I refused before, but I need it now. The jumper code. I need to be in the anti-void to cast the summoning. If I wait any longer, I'll be too weak to find answers. Turning his head away, Skep remained uneasy. Closing his eye sockets, the tall skeleton took a few breaths as he rubbed his skull. All right, but I'm only doing this because of the circumstances. Mal gave a soft smile and reached for the gas mask beside him, putting it on. Thanks, I appreciate this. Skep headed over, taking off his glove. Their hands touched, allowing him to transfer a copy of the jumper code to Mal. As soon as the transfer finished, Mal grabbed his bottle of sanitizer and sprayed Skep's hand. All right, let's go. The sand stood suddenly. Wait, right now? Said Skep, waving his hand before putting on the glove. No time like the present. I could use your help. Mal smiled under the mask. Besides, I wouldn't want anyone else by my side. The look in Skep's eyes softened and he smiled. All right, he nodded. After getting on his hoodie, Papyrus' scarf, the journal, and a backpack of supplies, Mal returned outside. He held up a hand, opening the portal himself. For a moment, a tinge of fear ran down his spine, the anti-void just beyond, the hellish blank landscape. However, Skep moved past him without a hint of caution and gazed back questioningly. Mal swallowed his terror and hopped through, closing the portal behind him. Now, Mal really felt disoriented, looking to Skep as the only thing in sight. Right then, how do we get started? Said Skep. Right. Miles set down the backpack, taking out charcoal, large markers, and retractable measuring tape. Handing one of each to Skep, Mal opened his journal to a page detailing the image of a large glyph, complete with symbols and inscriptions. I'll start by making the circle, then we'll build up from here. It needs to be as accurate as possible. Skep nodded, and the both of them crouched down to get to work. Using the tape and charcoal, Mal took special care to make every mark count. It would take them about 30 minutes to create the full glyph, a magic circle complete with symbols of the sun, moon, and cryptic inscriptions. Mal paced around it, making sure everything was just right before retrieving firewood from the bag, setting it up over the sun symbol. Stepping back, he stood by Skep looking over their work. Hey, looks pretty good. I knew I could trust you with this. But as he looked at the tall skeleton, Skep seemed distracted, as if wanting something to attack them, as if waiting for something to attack them from out of the light. He turned his attention back to Mal. Well, of course, the great Skep always has a steady hand. But what now? Well, now we just gotta invite them in, said Mal as he pulled out a bottle labeled kerosene. With kerosene? Skep's voice thick with confusion. Trotting into the circle, Mal poured the contents of the bottle over the wood before lighting and dropping a match over it. It instantly flared up, threateningly hot. Be careful! The tall skeleton scolded, seeming ready to charge in. Mal chuckled under his mask as he returned to Skep's side. He placed his hands in his pockets and waited. So, that's it? That's it, said Mal, though he felt a twist of disappointment. He half suspected this would be a wild goose chase, simply a fever dream, and at the very least if he were wrong, he could stop thinking about it. But as the fire grew brighter, it started breaking apart. The sparks swirled in tiny circles until they absorbed each other. The flame flared up in a sudden burst. From it, a small figure appeared, like a child with a singular eye, but with skin like flower petals. It seemed to be wearing something like a dress, but this too was only part of its being. "Hello, Skep! Hello, Mal! It's nice to finally meet you!" Her eye smiled cheerfully. Mal pulled his hands from his pockets, stunned. He couldn't contain the wave of excitement crashing out of him. "Yes! I knew it would work!" Leaping towards Skep, he almost pulled the taller skeleton into a hug before remembering his contagion. "Ah, well, you are very smart," commented Skep, but he couldn't hide the worry in his voice. "Of course, I'm your witness," she said as Mal returned to the circle. "My witness? What do you mean?" "I created you. This version of you. You're a you. I'm the one who made it come into being." As she spoke, she floated off of the fire, arms behind her back, swaying as a small child might. No doubt this was a lot of information to swallow at once for the skeleton. He glanced back at Skep, who seemed just as bewildered. "You created me? So you're responsible for what happened to me and my world?" She put a hand to her chin. Well, yes and no. The concept of responsibility becomes fuzzy on different levels of reality. I suppose for you, the answer would be yes. But for me, my kind, it's of no consequence. If I hadn't given your form a soul, you'd be nothing more than a passing thought. You and your world were my thoughts. But you wouldn't be talking to me now if I hadn't given you a soul. Mind racing, Mal could only ask the first questions that came to him. "So you're capable of creating worlds. Could you get rid of my virus? Could you take me back to my home? Bring back everyone who died?" "I mean, I could, but I don't think a world like that would make you happy. It would be so much less valuable and authentic." "I know what you're asking, wanting your family back." She tilted her head, the eyes squinting in sympathy. "But it would only be a new Papyrus and Eliza. They wouldn't be the family you lost, and you would always know that." The tired skeleton hung his head. "Then can you do anything for me at all?" He returned his gaze to her. "I still want all that. I want my world back, my family, without this damn disease." Her shoulders rose as she tensed. "I'm sorry, Mel. I won't do that." "Why not?" he screamed, stomping his foot towards her. "After everything I've been through, don't I deserve that?" Skep ran into the circle, grabbing Sans shoulders. "Mal, don't." "I'm dying, damn it!" Mal held his head. "I'm going to die and my existence will have amounted to nothing." The witness held out her hands. "I'm sorry, Mal. If I do what you ask, you will feel that way. That's the nature of your soul. That's what connects you to the original Sans." "Then I don't want to be a Sans anymore. I want to be my own person with my own story. I'm sick of being a copy of a copy of a copy of someone else." Mal pressed forward only because he knew Skep would hold him back. Her eye turned sad. "So you're asking to become a new person in a new world, completely cut off from everything you've ever known here?" "Yes!" he almost begged. "I can do something like that for you," she said, putting her hands back behind her back. "But we witnesses have rules about these things that are not easily explained. If you leave this multiverse, you can no longer resemble yourself as you do now. Your memories, everything that fundamentally makes you who you are, must die. Mal must no longer exist." No longer exist? What did that mean? Mal supposed that was the fate of all monsters. Monster souls did not endure like human ones. Maybe, if his soul could be repurposed... No, no, no! Skep's panicked voice brought him back to reality. The taller skeleton stood in front of him, squeezing his shoulders. "You can't be considering this. I won't let you do this." "Skep?" Mal's voice cracked as he saw the tears fall from his friend's face. "I can't lose you too, Mal. I know you're not my Sans, but you're still my family. You have me, all our friends. Isn't that good enough? I tried so hard to give you a good life, If there's anything I can change, I will. I'll search the multiverse high and low until we can cure your disease. Skep, it's not that. I'm grateful, I really am. Mal tensed in pain, feeling a crack in his soul as the virus continued to spread. But before he could mention anything, Skep pulled him into a hug. You're not leaving. That's final. Mal, unwillingly, hugged Skep back with just as much desperation. I want to stay. He's not my Papyrus, but he's my Skep. He means everything to me. I want out. It's not real. None of this is real. I want to be in a world where my life means something. I can't stay. Mal fell deeply into the darkness of his own mind, the feeling of water and pressure all around him. Lights in his mind flashed blue and orange amidst the storm of voices. Suffocating, he couldn't tell what voices were his own or of the chaos of his dreams. My pain makes me who I am. I don't want this pain anymore. It doesn't matter what world I'm in. I'll still be worthless. I don't want to be a copy anymore. You're just going to leave Skep behind? Are you really going to be that selfish? I'm still going to die even if I claw for those last remaining days. It'll mean nothing. Mal, answer me! Skep shook him gently. The glow of his eyes flashed in a daze. What? Say something, Mal. You're worrying me. Skep, I can't. Violently, something within Mal's skull pushed out, ripping off the mask with a loud snap of the rubber. Mal felt his left eye rip out along with it. Something within his bones pulled like roots from the earth. Falling to his knees, he barely caught himself, brittle bones cracking, neck and skull ranked about against his will. Vision blurred as Mal saw some black creature forming from out of his body. I refuse to die! It hissed through spiral, jagging teeth. Skep looked horrified, the witness frightened. Mal felt completely disabled as the creature lurched toward them, forming large bladed limbs to swing at the flower girl. With a flash, the tall skeleton grabbed up the witness and dodged the attack, but not before it made a tear at the white uniform Skep wore, cutting deeply into his back. Skep, are you okay? Said the witness. I'm all right, he huffed, looking back at the creature. Back to the creature growing even larger, though it was still strung to Mal's head. It hissed. Hand it over, Skep. That one-eyed monster is responsible for all of my suffering. I'm going to make it feel everything it put me through. Skep kept a firm grip on the witness, holding her away. I won't do that. I won't stand by and let someone do harm to others. Whatever you are, you need to leave us and Malady alone. Oh, my sweet Skep, I am Malady. Mal felt his soul tear like a joint pulling from a socket. Landing against the ground, all he could do was watch. The creature charged. Skep summoned the bone staff to block the oncoming attack, but the creature wrapped itself around the bone, swinging a blade at the girl in Skep's arm. From the right, a splatter of brightly colored paint slammed into the creature, knocking it to the ground. It writhed on the ground, hissing and brushing off the colors. Eek! Cried Skep. The legendary artist himself appeared, running up with Fresh Sands, who was armed with a colorful baseball bat. Hey, Skep, you all right? Said Ink. We felt the vibes were off. We're here to help, said Fresh. You can't stop me, said the parasite, Mal's eyes spiraling in its head. If you kill me, Malady dies. I will have my revenge on that little brat. Mal heaved, finding it difficult to breathe and remain conscious. His whole body felt numb, and he couldn't be sure if he could move. Mal! Wake up! Please wake up! Skep called to him. Hand over the witness, and you'll have Malady back the way he was, said the creature, standing upright in an attempt to be humanoid. Skep, protect the little one. I can handle this, said Ink as he stepped forward with Fresh to defend them. A deep guttural growl could be heard before the twisted creature charged for the Sanses. Ink and Fresh armed their weapons. Fresh chucked an exploding Fresh chucked an explosive Furby, but the creature leapt overhead. Ink's reflexes were faster as he knocked the creature with another splatter of paint from his brush. The parasite fell hard, struggling to remove the paint. Rushing to make a more permanent strike, Ink stood over the creature, but a backward slash of its blade struck the artist across the chest. "Ink!" cried Fresh. As Ink stumbled back, another Furby flew at the creature. It barely escaped, rolling away from the blast. Still holding the witness, Skep ran back to Mel and knelt down. He let her go long enough to shake Mal's shoulder. "Wake up! He hasn't does it! He should be alive, right? He should still be alive, right?" "His soul is conflicted," said the witness. She glanced over her shoulder back at the fight. "His desire to live, to justify the pain. It will destroy what's left of him, all to keep the memories of a tortured past." "Skep," Mal wheezed. "Mal, thank the stars you're alive. What's happening? What was that thing that came out of you?" said Skep. He can only guess. "The disease." "Skep, look out!" cried Ink. Snapping his head up, Skep and Mal beheld the parasites scurrying on all fours towards them. But Mal could see Skep's hesitation, unwilling to move from defending them. Screaming, Mal swung up a hand, striking the creature in the chest with a bone attack. It stopped the charge, but he felt the strike reflected in his own chest, ribs snapping and blood soaked his shirt. Skep looked back to him. "Mal, you're hurt!" Pushing himself up, Mal held his chest. "That thing really is me." Shaken in fatigue, Mal watched the creature pull the bone from its body, growling in frustration. Grabbing on the Skep for support, Mal stood and summoned his bone club. "That means this thing is my problem. I should take care of it." The parasite laughed, pulling itself upright. "You can't stop me. I'm a part of your soul. Anything you do to me will only reflect on you." Undeterred, Mal held up his weapon. "If that means protecting the people I care about." In a flash, he teleported in front of the creature, swinging hard. "Then so be it!" As the club made contact, Mal felt his own skull crack. Dazed, his mind returned to those snowy woods, his daughter's shriek ringing in his mind. Before he realized it, the creature had reattached itself to his skull, the two halves of their soul reforming. The parasite pulled the skeleton close, hissing in his face. "Mal!" he heard Skep cry. "Wait a minute!" Ink yelled, holding out his hand to order Skep down. "You want to live. You want to live so badly it hurts," said the creature to Mal. "We can make them understand. Our suffering meant something. We can prove we're more real than any of them can hope to imagine. We deserve to be the real Sans." He couldn't deny that's how he used to feel. Deep down, his resentment, his hatred seeing anyone dare to claim his former identity for themselves. But something had changed. Seeing this thing outside of himself, telling him what to think. Despite the overwhelming pain, he still managed to grin. "Burn in hell." Moving before he had the chance to think, Mal summoned a sharpened bone and stabbed the parasite's eye. Mal felt the burst inside his chest. The creature's sharp wail radiated through every bone. Half of his soul fell away, leaving behind fatal damage on what remained. The virus fell to the ground in a messy goop. Skep barely caught Mal before he slammed into the ground. Carefully, the taller skeleton held him in his arms. "Mal!" "Hey there, bro." Mal breathed heavily. His expression fell. "Oh, sorry. I made that mistake again." The gaze of his remaining eye turned to the witness as she approached. It's okay. You can make that mistake as many times as you want," said Skep, his voice breaking, his sockets forming tears. The flower girl held out her hand, summoning Mal's soul into view. "It's breaking. He only has a few moments." She turned her eye to Skep. I can save what's left of him by crafting a new half, but he won't be Malady anymore. Looking conflicted, Skep looked between the witness and down at Mal. Skep, please. Mal put on a weak smile. I still want to be free. I still want a world and an identity of my own. But if you go away, I'll never see you again. Tears ran down Skep's face. You'll still have the memories. I can never pay you back for your kindness, but I need to be free from my past, my sins, a clean slate. He could feel Skep shaking before the taller skeleton pulled him into a hug. Of all the things Mal would regret to lose, it would be Skep. Still, Mal petted Skep back gently. You'll be fine. I know you will. You got so many friends. I know you won't forget me. You'll always be my brother, Mal. I promise I won't forget. A sharp gasp in pain, Mal knew he had mere seconds left. He could see into Papyrus's face one last time. If my witness is kind, she'll let me dream of you. Vision going dark, he took his last breath. I'll always be your bro, Skep. Skep felt the light of his soul dim briefly as Mal turned to dust into his arms, leaving behind nothing but empty clothes. The flower girl at his side still held Mal's soul firmly between her hands. At first, it threatened to shatter, but she mustered light in her palms, fusing it to the soul until it became a singular spark. Skep turned his gaze to her. Is he? Her eyes smiled back at him. He's gonna be fine. I'll make sure he has a good home. He better. He deserves to be happy, he said, and let his gaze fall back to all that remained of Malady. Ink and Fresh approached quietly, the artist turning his attention to the glyph that remained on the ground. By the time Skep raised his gaze, the witness had disappeared completely. What you thinking, Ink? Fresh asked as the smaller skeleton rubbed his chin. Awfully clever. How did he manage to get magic like this? Ink thought aloud, crouching to look at the symbols. A second more, Corfrisk appeared before them, observing the symbol with a tilted brow. It's unlike anything I've seen in our reality before. It feels dangerous. Ink, I think this should remain a secret, or be destroyed. Ink shook his head gently. No, I don't think it should be destroyed. That Sans must have used this to call that creature to reach a different world. If this is a gateway, it's my duty to protect it. Standing up, Ink pulled out a sheet of paper, unrolling it and holding it outward. The will of his magic peeled the symbol from the imaginary ground where it lay. It shrank in size, applying itself to the sheet of paper. Cor gave Ink a pensive look. I'm uncertain what people would think if they ever find out that's possible. It could cause a panic or a rush of reckless behavior. The survivors who live in the OT could be vulnerable to such ideas. Ink folded up the paper, tucking it back into his pocket. It'll be fine. I can keep it a secret. Promise. Besides, that Sans was gonna die anyways. Something like this could be a way to save monsters. That Sans? The way Ink spoke made Skep grip Mal's jacket tightly. That Sans was my friend. The hiss in his voice drew everyone's attention. Right, said Ink, a little nervous but not apologetic. In any case, I can lock this away nice and tight in the doodle sphere. No one needs to know about it or what happened here. However, Frisk's expression made it seem as though they didn't believe Ink. I fear you will grow more curious about it than you're letting on. Please give me your word that this magic will remain secret. Cross my soul and hope to die, Ink grinned, swinging his brush out to form a portal. Fresh, let's go, he said, practically falling through it. Fresh followed before the portal closed behind them. With a deep sigh, Skep turned his attention back to Malady's remains. He'd have to gather up what was left and have it laid to rest. He could tell Frisk's eyes had turned to him before they even spoke. "I'm sorry. I know you and Malady were close," said Frisk. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing. However, as the skeleton gathered up the clothes and the dust with his hands, he felt something heavy inside Malady's jacket. The journal. It was still there. Despite knowing the dangerous information within, he felt an intense need to keep it. He said nothing of it to Frisk, collecting everything into the jacket to carry.